You are listening to the Project Management Podcast. We bring project management topics to beginners and experts. Find us on the web at pmpodcast.blogspot.com or send your emails to pmpodcast@gmail.com. Hello and welcome to show number 15. I am Cornelius Fichtner. This is the Project Management Podcast for the 24th of December 2005. Merry Christmas to all of you. Today we'll be looking at status reports, what to write in them and what to not write in them. And we also have 2 reviews in the Good, Bad and Ugly series for you on the show today. And you can consider the second one as kind of a Christmas present, because I will be reviewing 2 new podcasts for you that focus solely on project management. Actually, it's 2.5 new podcasts for you. That comes at the end of the show, but no fast forwarding here. To start out the show, here are a few announcements and items that I want to get off my chest, and we start with a message from our sponsor. Project Load is the web-based project management tool for your team. As project manager, you create the tasks and assign activities. As your team progresses, their timesheets automatically feed into project reports. With task forecasting, document storage, integrated notes, and over 25 alerts, Project Load is the one tool for project monitoring. Visit us at projectload.com. Eric Johnson wrote in, and he writes, I graduated from Tennessee Technological University with a business MIS degree in December 2003. I started working, like most new IT graduates, with hardware and PC support, and since moved to developing applications with .NET tools. My goal is to use this experience in project management in the near future. Project management just makes sense to me. The more I learn about IT and project management, the more I see the similarities between industries and processes. I've enjoyed your reviews and explanations on PM techniques, events, and your podcast in general. I feel that your site references and podcasts are a great tool for me as I develop my plan to pursue project management as a profession. The reason why I'm actually reading this to you is because of the question which follows. And he writes, Cornelius, can someone excel in project management without a PMP certification? Or do you think it is a necessary justification to be accepted within the profession? The only reason I ask is it seems that getting a PMP certification is very trendy, for lack of a better word. I do not want to jump on the bandwagon just to get a PMP because it's the thing to do. I want to be a successful project manager. If those go hand in hand, then I have no problems putting the effort forth to get one. How do you feel about this? Well, in my view, the PMP certification more or less tells me that you were able to sit down for a 4-hour exam and answer a certain number of questions correctly, that you have passed sort of a minimal standard in project management to even get to this level. To even be able to take the test, you had to have certain number of hours in project management, certain number of years, you had to have certain training. So that to me just tells me where you are at in your know-how as a PMP, as a project manager in general. It does not tell me that you are a good project manager. I mean, have you ever had a doctor, a medical doctor, with whom you weren't happy? Well, it's exactly the same thing with project managers. Being a PMP only tells you that you have some sort of a certification. It doesn't tell you you're a good project manager. Yes, you can definitely be a good project manager without having the PMP certification. But having gone through the training, having taken the test, gives you a common vocabulary with me. It gives both of us the same common understanding of the tools and techniques and processes. And if I had to choose between two people, one is a PMP and the other one is not a PMP, I would probably focus more or lean more towards the PMP, simply because I know how this person is supposed to think, because of the training that went into him, into the PMP certificate. Doesn't mean that he's the better project manager. I don't really know. I will learn that afterwards. What you will also find is that the PMP seems to be more or less a required item now in most of the job ads that you see. PMP is no longer suggested. PMP is required. PMP will also give you RESPECT. It will give you the respect. It will give you the respect from the HR department, simply because they're looking for that. It will give you the respect from your peers, project managers like myself, and it'll give you the respect of your colleagues at work whom you work with, because they know that you have a certification in what it is that you're doing. So there are pluses and minuses. As for me, yes, getting a PMP is worthwhile, simply because it puts you on a level playing field with everybody else out there. Alright, enough said about whether or not to get a PMP or not. But I found something quite interesting in the Yahoo groups. I monitor the Prince2 project management Yahoo group occasionally, and I found the following question from Gregory Tucker. I don't exactly know where Gregory is from, but he writes, I am currently studying for the practitioner exam. That's, of course, the Prince2 practitioner exam. I have taken and failed it once. Does anybody know how many practitioners there are in the United States for Prince2? It doesn't seem very popular right now in the US, but with increasing adoption of ITIL in North America, I suspect there will be a growing interest in Prince2 as well over the next few years. Well, Greg, I don't know, but let's put this out here to the listeners. If you are a Prince2 practitioner and you've taken and passed the exam, I'd appreciate it if you would drop me a quick email at pmpodcast@gmail.com, and I can tally that number and we can announce that in the next show. You may remember in the past I have been talking about whether or not listening to the Project Management Podcast would qualify for PDUs. If you are a PMP, you're required to obtain 60 PDUs in 3 years to keep your certification going. Well, I had a bit back and forth between the PMI and myself. I didn't agree with their initial, no, you can't do this. But I have now received a clarification from Edwin Delgado, and he is the continuing certification processor at the PMI. He writes, I do not doubt the content of your broadcast or the work that you must put into your lecture-style broadcast that you provide to the listeners. The real question is in regards to reporting the PDUs. How would we, the PMI, possibly know that they were really listening to the whole broadcast or just part of it? How do we know that actual learning took place? There is such a thing as distant learning, but interaction between the student and the teacher is always present, such as in a classroom or over the web. If you were to provide some sort of a PDU code at the beginning and end of each of your shows, who is to say that the people reporting this code listened the entire session, or that they were just given the code by someone else? In a classroom lecture, there would at least be a person present to verify attendance and verify that they completed the entire lecture or course. There is an actual teacher-to-student interaction at all times. Okay, that makes it clear. Just listening to the Project Management Podcast does not qualify for PDUs. I would of course have preferred that the PMI says yes and that listening to the Project Management Podcast is a qualifying activity for you PMPs out there who are listening to the show. But I can understand the arguments that Edwin Delgado makes, and I accept his decision. And now, let us move on to the helpful resources and followed right after that to the PM News. I have 5 helpful resources for you today, but I'm just going to breeze through the first 4 and concentrate a little more on the 5th one here today. The first 2 are from the same website. There's a free registration that's required in order to read those, and they are both high-level overviews. The first one is a high-level overview of project management offices, and the second one is a high-level overview of project management methodologies. They're both kind of something that you may want to give to a manager type person who is interested in understanding more about PMOs and project management methodology. And the second one about the methodology is also quite helpful if you'd like to learn a little bit more about the basics of the PMI methodology. The third helpful resource is entitled Project Management Techniques for Adaptive Action. It is sort of a comparison between agile project management and also heavyweight project management, as they call it. It's actually the first time that I've heard that particular term. Quite an interesting read there. Then number 4 is taking your PMO to the next step, the Office of the CIO. And in this white paper, Margot Visitacion is talking about the positive benefits you can reach by integrating the Office of the CIO and the Project Management Office. So if that's something you're planning, that might be a good thing to read as well. The helpful resource I would like to focus a little more on today is entitled Managing Project Team Members. That is written by Neville Turbit from Project Perfect, and I think I had another white paper of his that I focused on a little while ago here, and this is very nicely written. I mean, all of us project managers at some point or another, we're going to have to manage project team members, and even if you think that I know how to manage project team members, this is a good read for you. I learned a few more things that I hadn't considered yet. For instance, have you ever considered that there is a difference really between project management teams and administrative teams, regular teams in an organization, and that the number one difference is that a project team has a start, an end, and terms of time, like a project does? I never looked at it like that. So he talks about these differences. Then he goes into the environment that a project team has to work in. He talks about some of the usual problems, how to go about setting up the teams, how to divide roles and responsibilities, how to set project direction, how to manage workload, maybe giving some rewards, how to focus on individual skills of the team members, and of course, very important, team interaction. And he also talks a lot about how to work on conflicts. And in the end, he quite clearly states, let me find this again, this topic is endless. In fact, there may be a part 2 in the near future, and I'm actually looking forward to reading this. So much for the helpful resources, and now on with the news. There are 3 news items that you can find on the blog this week, and I'm actually going to focus on the 4th one that's not even on the blog, and you'll figure out why. The 3 that I put up there is, one is an article about managing mega projects, quite an interesting read for people who manage large projects. The second one is the fact that Microsoft bought a company that will allow them to put project portfolio management into Microsoft Office. And the third one has a very interesting title, which I had to read about 5 or 6 times until I realized this has nothing to do with project management. And because it was so confusing, I figured, hey, I want to confuse my listeners as well. So it's up there. Try to read that title and understand just from the title what it means. It's quite a funny thing. But here is the news that I want to focus on, and like I said, this is not mentioned anywhere on the website, and you'll get why. Here, let me read the titles of these 4 news items. 1. The Project Management Institute certifies 13 APRO employees. 2. MIPR officers attend project management course. 3. Boeing and Amid East Egypt provide project management skills to Egyptian engineers. And 4. Diversified Project Management promotes Boras and Buchanan to senior project managers. When I read these, and you'll probably agree, I thought, this isn't news. I mean, who cares? Okay, somebody got promoted to senior project manager. Big deal. A group of 25 MIPR officers attended project management training. Yeah, so what? But then I got thinking a little bit and I thought, this is interesting. 10 years ago, this would probably not have been in the news. These 4 news and press releases would never have made it anywhere. And I found them in the last 2 weeks. So I think this is actually quite an interesting thing to see that these 4 companies found it found it important to promote the fact that they are using project management in a really standardized fashion. So that's the good thing about these 4 news items. Project management, even taking a project management course, seems to be newsworthy. And that's all I have for the news this week. Like every week, you can find links to most of the news and all of the helpful resources on the website pmpodcast.blogspot.com. And now let us move on to the project management tip of the week. This week, I'm not really sure if it's a tip or more of a tirade on my part because of a comment that I heard from a fellow project manager this week. And if you listen to the last show, you know that the Project Management Podcast's tip of the week always comes with background music, which I don't download from music.podshow.com. The song today is from a band called Dark Horse. They are from Devon in the UK, and the song is called Starting Over. I had a conversation with a project management friend the other day, and he told me that management had announced that they are going to replace project milestones with project stage gates. And we got talking about this, and I thought that's a very odd thing to do, because let's look at the definitions quickly here. A project milestone is a significant point or event in a project, according to the PMBOK. So, for instance, let's say you are responsible in a supermarket to deliver the shelves, to have the shelves set up. So your milestone is going to be shelves up on November 15th. The stage gates, however, are formal meetings in which the completion of a stage is approved and the project moves on. So if you are, say, in the initiation phase of a project, you meet at the end of this initiation phase and you say, we are now done with this initiation phase. Does everybody approve? And everybody nods and you sign a formal document. So there's the difference between those two, and they've replaced one with the other, which seems completely impossible to me. And we talked about this, and finally we got to the reasoning behind this. The reason is that in his company, the project milestones are tied in with the MBOs of the project managers. So as a project manager, you get an MBO, management by objectives. So you have your objectives set. And in the example before, that would have been the project manager's MBO is to have the supermarket shelves delivered by, November 15th? All right. And if this project manager doesn't deliver, then of course he did not reach his target MBO, and therefore his performance appraisal will be bad because, you didn't reach this target, therefore you get a lower rating in this. All right. Now, we kept talking about this, and I can kind of see where they're heading with this. They're now saying that as a project manager, you're no longer responsible for a particular milestone. Yes, you still have to deliver the supermarket shelves on the 15th of November, but we're no longer going to measure you on the deliverable of the milestone, we're going to measure you on the deliverable of the stage gate. Because in every stage, initiation, analysis, you name it, you have multiple milestones. One milestone may be 2 weeks late. Another milestone may be 3 weeks early. So in the end, this should all work out so that at the end you have a stage gate meeting, which is on the day when you had originally planned it. All right. So far, so good. So instead of being measured on the milestone, you're now being measured on the stage gate. But what the company didn't do is they didn't eliminate scope creep with this. And this is where the main issue came from. So you are the project manager, you're supposed to deliver your supermarket shelves on the 15th of November. But before you can do that, a floor has to be put in, walls have to be put in, electric systems have to be put in. Without that, there's nothing you can do. And then there is scope creep. Oh, we want the walls pink and no longer in white, and the electric system has to be upgraded to this and that and the other. So the company did not take into consideration that milestone dates need to change when the scope of the project changes. So there was nothing they could do. I mean, you had your date set for 11/15 or whatever it was, but you didn't even get to start until the 20th of the month because the people before you did all their milestones. They all had a delay in their milestones. All right. So management went ahead and said, well, since there are 10 milestones in a stage gate, some of them will be early, some of them will be late, therefore we're going to measure you on the stage gates and no longer on the milestones themselves. It makes kind of sense. In my opinion, what this company would have needed to do is to implement a change management system. We talked about that as well, and he said, well, it's almost impossible. If you want to change the project plan in my company, it requires an act of God. So the correct thing to do would have been, yes, still measure the performance of your project managers in their goals, in their MBOs, on their particular deliverables, on their particular milestones and the dates. But have a change management process in place that takes that into consideration, so that when the scope of the project changes, which most always leads to a change in the delivery dates, that leads to a change in the milestone and leads to a change in the amendment on how you measure the success of your project managers. Not by just simply saying, oh, we will delete all the milestones, or we'll exchange focus on the milestones with focus on the stage gates. That's just not the right way to do it. All right, so much for the Project Management Podcast's tip of the week. The idea would of course have been that I finish talking before the song is over. I failed. Obviously, I'm talking too much. Moving right along. And we're moving along to the first of the 2 good, bad, and ugly reviews that I have for you today. Today's good, bad, and ugly review is about 2 episodes of the Info Talk series podcast, and that is hosted by the podtech.net. The host is John Furrier, and these 2, episodes or segments, if you want to call them, are each about 10 minutes long. They were recorded in May 2005 at the GNOME Dex conference, and John The host is talking to Scott Birkin. Scott is a former Microsoft employee, a project manager, and he was actually the program manager for Internet Explorer 3 back in 1996. If I understood this correctly, Scott has recently left Microsoft and he wrote a book called The Art of Project Management, and he also has a website, of course, theartofpm.com, where you can learn more about this. And currently Scott says my job is to promote the book. So these two episodes here start out with Scott selling his book to the audience. But then John Furrier, the host, does a very good job by guiding Scott kind of away from the book and talking a lot about project management and his work as a project manager at Microsoft. They talk about his experiences and especially about the issues and troubles that Scott faced at Microsoft. And he has a very nice story that he tells about a 1.5 hour meeting where he got burnt over the fire. They talk about the issues that he faced and less about the solutions that he took in order to bring the project back onto track. But nevertheless, very good listening to this particular episode. Then they move on and they talk about the vision of project management and where it's going to go in the future. And of course, at this point, because we're talking about software development and project management in software development, a lot of what's happening at this moment is going virtual, having teams all over the world. And in my point of view, Scott clearly and correctly says that project management is becoming more and more a relationships management job. And communication skills are so important. And here I go again saying that the P in PM might as well stand for people management. One thing that I found unusual in this first segment is that Scott said that it is not normal to have an actual project manager assigned to a project, at least where he comes from, and in his experience, he says that usually the lead developer also becomes the project manager. My experience is slightly different, but then again, your mileage may vary. That's segment one. That was the first 10 minutes. And the second 10 minutes, it's actually a separate download and a separate file. In this second segment, again 10 minutes, they talk about project management in startups. And it starts out with project management and it goes more and more and more into management and how to manage a startup company. Especially in how to transition a startup company from a chaotic, almost garage type company to a more formalized structure. And Scott says that the biggest issue that the CEO in this hectic phase is facing is the fact that the CEO has to give up control. He has to delegate work to new people coming in. And the CEO has to move into a completely different role. Until now, the CEO was probably everything at the same time. He was the technology guru, he was the project manager, he led the company, and suddenly he has to take a step back and let other people do stuff and become a real manager rather than a doer. The rest of this segment is then a real brief overview of all the troubles that a young company has in this stage in terms of balancing the requirements of technology, business, and customer focus, and also the changing roles which are the main challenge. My verdict on this? Even though these two segments are quite clearly an interview aimed at promoting Scott's book, this is great listening. On the good, bad, and ugly scale, this one gets a good. let us move on to the main section of the show. And the main section of the show today is going to be about status reports. Yes, those dreaded things. Well, let me start out with two statements here. First of all, in my view, every single contact that you have with your stakeholders is a status report. You make a phone call to your customer, you send an email to your boss, you send a telefax to a contractor, you have lunch with your team members. Every single contact is a status report. Even if you walk up to the water cooler in the corridor and you say, "Hey, Susan, how's it going with that issue we had last week?" It's a status report because you are communicating something about the project to some of your stakeholders. So keep that in mind. Also, remember that 90% of a project manager's work is communication, and a status report is a vital part of this, a very vital part of this. If you don't do your status reports, yes, they're a drag, but if you don't do them, you will regret it. It really helps to communicate your work with your customer, boss, sponsor, project team member, you name it, via a status report. Because a status report brings everybody back onto the same page on your project. Now let's look at 3 items here. Who to send it to, how often to send it, and what format to use. Well, the correct answer to all 3 of these questions is, it depends. It depends on your project. Let's go through these one by one. Who do you send it to? Well, go through the list of your stakeholders. You have customers, sponsors, you have external parties, maybe regulatory agencies, environmental groups that you have to communicate with. You name it. The list can really be endless. And you, as the project manager, have to decide who should receive your status report. And depending on your situation, you may even have to write 2 reports. One for the core team and one for an extended group of recipients. I'm currently in a situation like this. I have a project that has both an internal as well as an external portion. So part of it is for internal customers and part of it is for external customers. And of course, I'm writing 2 status reports. One of them goes internally and one of them goes externally because I don't want to give exactly the same kind of information to our external customer. There are a few things that I keep closer to my heart, and I can tell those closer to the heart things to the internal folks that are on the project. Second item, how often do you send it? Well, you have to send it regularly. Define what frequency fits the current phase of your project. For instance, in the early phases of the project, maybe the design phase, you can probably get away with sending a written status report every 2 to 3 weeks, maybe even every month, if you keep the major stakeholders appraised verbally. But during the implementation and rollout phase of your project, you definitely want to switch to a weekly status. Clearly communicate also the frequency that you are going to send this status report out, and if there are any changes in the frequency, like I will not be sending a status report next week because I am on vacation, something like that. Make it clear that your recipients know that there will not be a status report for however long. Do the best you can also to send it on the communicated target date. Like if you send it out every Friday and you're late and you have to send it out on Monday, well, apologize to them. Tell them that, hey, I was really busy on Friday, sorry about that, hope not to do this again, here's the status report from last Friday. Because if your status report is received on a predictable date, that means that just from a perception point of view, your project is predictable. You know, the status report comes regularly. That means that your project must be led in a predictable, in a good fashion. And in the end, perception is all that really counts, right? Third, let's talk about the format a little bit. You definitely want to do your status report in writing. An oral status report is okay, that's a one-on-one, but to give a clear status to everybody, to bring everybody back on the same page, you need to do it in writing. And you want to do it in the same format every week. Again, predictability is important. And doing it the same way every week makes it easy on you as well, right? You don't have to invent the wheel every week anew and try to be creative in your status report. No. You don't have to do that. Personally, I like to send my status reports in the forms of an email. That works for me because my projects are small to medium sized with maybe 5 to 10 people on it. But the larger you get, the bigger and the more complex your status reports probably get. What I do is when I send out the email, I make it clear that in the subject line, I say something along the lines of project name, this is the status report for the week ending December 23rd, 2005. And I always use the same sections, of course. In the email, I really try to almost have a template email, and I use bullets within the email. If you are using KPIs, key performance indicators, like maybe earned value, or if you are listing milestones that were reached or missed, then make sure that you mention those KPIs at the beginning, the very front of your written status report. The most important information in your email or in your PDF or Word document status report has to come at the very beginning. But no matter whether you're using an email or whether you are using a Word template, tweak the format as you go along. And also talk to the recipients of the status report. Find out from them, hey, is the status report giving you the information that you need? And if not, change the information in the status report. How long should a status report be? There's a very clear answer that I have for you. 1 page, no more. If it's longer than a page, nobody is going to read it. If it's shorter than a page, you can be certain that everybody who will receive it will take a few moments and read it. My status reports are usually about 7 or 8 bullets long, and that's short bullets. I make it as precise and as short as I possibly can. Now, let's move on to the content. What belongs into a good status report? There are really 4 main items that you should report on. First of all, what is the project progress since the last status report? Second, were there any issues, both positive or negative issues, that have happened during this time? Third, what did you do to mitigate those issues, the negative issues, or strengthen the positive findings that you had? And fourth, of course, next steps. Let me look at them one by one here. So the first one was, what is the project progress since the last status report? That's pretty much self-explanatory, right? But the big problem here, of course, is how much detail do you go into? Well, as much as necessary. Use common sense to determine what information the readers of the status reports need. They don't need to have every single detail that has happened. They probably want the big picture. They want to see the good, the bad, and the ugly of your project, and give that to them. Second, were there any issues? Both positive and negative, and that's actually the main idea here. Don't focus only on the negative things that have happened in your projects. Status reports, by their pure nature, they tend to be, you are reporting the exceptions, you are reporting the negative. That's just what they tend to be. But that's not really always necessary. Try to branch out a little bit. Mention good work that was done. Mention milestones that were reached. And mention good solutions to technical problems that were developed by your project team. So don't only mention negative issues, mention positive issues as well. Show that the project is moving forward. The third item of the content is, what did you do to mitigate or strengthen these issues? This is not only good for the reader, but this is also good for you. Because think about it. If you as a project manager have a problem on your project and you don't know in your status report what to write about, what did we do about this problem, then you really have a problem, because there is a problem and you don't know what you did. So you really want to focus on this, and you want to say exactly, okay, for the first thing we solved it by doing this, for the second thing we solved it by doing that. And if you can do that, you know personally that you are on top of the project, and you also know that by giving this information to your readers, to your stakeholders who get the status report, you are informing them properly. Number 4, next steps. Well, yeah, that's pretty much self-explanatory. What are you going to do next until we receive the next status report? Where is the project going to go? Yeah, that's pretty much the 4 items that are the main focus in the content. Well, wait a minute, you might say. What about the other stuff, like change control information, budget, milestones, percent complete, maybe even a separate list of action items, resource issues, risk mitigation. What about that, Cornelius? Don't you want to mention that in the project status report? Well, those items are really difficult to discuss in a general sense here. My suggestion to you is that if your project status reports require that you report these kind of items, then you will have to invest some time up front and creating an appropriate status report template for this. Let's say one that contains a section for percent complete. Okay, so now you have a template that contains this percent complete. Yeah, well, but how are you going to report on it? Your next step, of course, then needs to be that you have to set up some sort of a system with which you can accurately measure percent complete. Or if you have risk, how to measure and report on risk, or milestones, budgets. So this is going to be your task to come up with some sort of a process to measure these. Yeah, well, risk is a little bit esoteric, right? How do you measure risk in regards to a project status report? Very difficult. Yeah? The 4 items that I mentioned here. What did you do since the last status report? What were the issues? What did you do about the issues? And what are you going to do next? These 4 items, they're easy to report. They're very quickly done on a project status report. The numerical information that you want to report, the more you need of these numerical informations, key performance indicators, the more processes of measuring them you need to have in place, and the more administrativia you're going to place on your project. Well, you can't just make up these numbers now, can you? Well, and that brings me to another point. Don't ever lie in your status report. It will definitely get to you. They will find out and you will be out of there in no time. Writing something in a status report doesn't make it so. If you say, we are ahead of schedule, and you know very well you're behind schedule, it doesn't change the fact that you're behind schedule. So be honest in your status report, because the truth will eventually come out. And I even consider spinning to be a lie. And by spinning, I mean to, give some sort of a twist, a positive wording around a negative subject. I find that's unprofessional. I mean, make it clear, be honest, and make it precise. If there is something that I personally feel uncomfortable about noting in my status report, then I will most probably leave it out in this status report, and I will make a huge attempt to address this particular issue before I write the next status report, so that I can mention that this has been solved. One thing you also don't want to do is you don't want to put any surprises into the status report. You don't suddenly want to say, yeah, we didn't know that last week, but by now we are 60% over budget. Have a good weekend. That's not something you want to put into a status report. If you have huge issues, you want to personally bring them to the attention of all your stakeholders. The status report is not the right medium to do this. Yeah, and that's pretty much what I have to say about project status reports and how to use them and what to put into them. I would really appreciate your feedback on this one here and your insights regarding how you handle status reports. Do you write them regularly, irregularly? Do you use email? Do you use some sort of a template? Do you have any key performance indicators? And if you do, how do you measure them? Do you have tools in place? Send me a quick email. Let me know. I would really like to communicate here a little bit with you so that we can all learn more about good status reporting. All right, we are ending the show today with the promised second good, bad, and ugly review of the 2.5 new podcasts that focus on nothing but project management. Hey, finally! There are 2 new podcasts on project management available for you. And they are The Saga of the Project from Hell and Estimating Technology Projects. Both of these podcasts are available in the iTunes directory. Simply start iTunes, click on the music store icon, then select podcasts, and in the podcast directory, search for the term project management. You'll get about 10 results, but only 3 of these results are really worth looking at. One, of course, being the project management podcast, and the 2 other results that you can look at are the ones that I want to talk about here today. Both of these podcasts are produced by companies, and they are using the podcast as a marketing tool. Let's start with The Saga of the Project from Hell, which is by Dick Billows. He's a PMP from 4pm.com. So far, there are 2 episodes available, and each are exactly 6 minutes long. As a company, 4pm.com delivers project management, training, and certification in the USA. The Saga of the Project from Hell is a commercially oriented podcast, and it is an extension of the 4PM newsletter. I think, if I remember it correctly, it's called PM Talk. In this, 4PM has been writing about the saga of the Project from Hell for a long time. And I think, they also talk about the Impudent Project Manager. I've been a subscriber of it all. I've always felt, however, that the newsletter was quite theatrical and somewhat over the top in storylines, analogies, and also the writing style. The podcast is no different. The 2 episodes that we have so far both give you a short theatrical story from a project from hell. Each of them focuses on another project that has gone totally sour. And this is really where my main problem lies with this podcast. It's just too much for me. It's over the top. I do not like this theatrical approach. When I am listening to podcasts, I want 2 things. I want either entertainment or I want something educational. And in this case, I'm not looking for entertainment. I'm looking for educational. I'm looking for tips. I'm looking for tricks, advice, and real information. I don't want a story. One of the 2 stories in the Saga of the Project from Hell actually leaves you hanging at the most exciting part of the story that they're bringing, and it says, if you want to know more, read more on our website. I do understand, of course, that 4PM uses the vehicle of the podcast to bring more traffic and more business to the website. But you do that by having great content. And by having great content, you build a name for yourself and people will want to come to you because they trust you. To find the podcast on the 4pm website, you have to look on the right-hand side at 4pm.com, a little bit under the picture of Dick Billows himself, and you will see a small link titled Saga of the Project from Hell. You click on that and it goes to a new page, and there again, check on the right-hand side of the page. It's one of the first links right there. It's really easier almost to find it in the iTunes directory. The sound quality of both episodes could improve. It sounds like they recorded it in a big empty room. But I tell you, the male voice on one of the two episodes is just absolutely fabulous. I really wish that I had a voice like this gentleman does. The second podcast is called Estimating Technology Projects, and it is by Bill Gordon, who is the president of iRequire Technologies. And iRequire is spelled iRequire. iRequire is the maker of a tool called Ignite, which, according to Bill, will help you create better estimates, hence Estimating Technology Projects, the title of the podcast. Bill has chosen to publish this podcast via the Telcaster network, and that means that Bill records his podcast via the telephone. So he calls a number of the Telcaster network, records the show via the phone, and Telcaster then handles everything in regards to publishing. All that Telcaster does is add a short announcement at the beginning, at the end of the podcast, and then publishes it. In this introductory podcast, Bill Gordon explains the problem with ballpark estimating of technology projects as we know it today. The episode is 6 minutes and about 30 seconds long, and he gives us quite a good overview of what is wrong with ballpark estimating, and without really mentioning that particular tool. Bill has a pleasant voice, and the sound quality of this episode is quite good considering that it is, after all, recorded via a phone line. I did actually enjoy this podcast, and at the end I felt I had learned something. To find this podcast on their website, go to iRequire.com, remember it's spelled with a Q, and then click on Products. The podcast is at the bottom of that page. My verdict? It's really difficult to say anything after only one episode of Estimating Technology Projects and 2 episodes of The Project from Hell. I don't really know where they're heading, so at this point I don't feel comfortable applying the good, bad and ugly rating scale to these 2 podcasts. So for the moment, let's say that both podcasts are okay. In my opinion, The Project from Hell needs to get off the theatrical and move into the practical, and Estimating Technology Projects needs to keep giving us sound advice like they have today in this episode, and not overwhelm us with future podcasts in which they keep coming back again and again and again to the tool which they want to sell. And those are the 2 new project management podcasts that are available for you. I recorded the review that you have just heard about a week ago, and in the meantime the Project from Hell has released its 3rd podcast in the Project from Hell series, and this one's actually quite good. I liked it. It is less theatrical, and there is a lot of good advice in there, and I learned something really. Now, wait a minute, you might say, you promised us 2.5 podcasts that focus on project management. So far, we've only heard 1. Well, here you go. The 2.5th one is by True Solutions Incorporated. I found this press release here for you. Let me read this. True Solutions Incorporated announces free podcast for PMP exam preparation. Beginning in January 2006, True Solutions Incorporated will offer downloadable podcast editions of its 47 lessons PMP Lunchtime Lecture Series. The new weekly podcasts provide an additional training alternative for PMP candidates, CAPM candidates, project managers, and project team members who are preparing for the PMP exam, or anyone who wants to enhance their project management knowledge. So this is going to start in January. That's why I call it half a podcast, because at this point it's just vaporware. But I am definitely going to keep my eyes open for you, and as soon as it's available, I'm going to listen in and let you know where to find it and tell you all about it. That's it for today. Thank you very much for listening. The next show is once again going to be in 2 weeks from today, and by then I hope to have an interview ready for you where we will talk about managing your job search as a project. As always, you can find us on the web at pmpodcast.blogspot.com or send your emails to pmpodcast@gmail.com. And when you write, please tell me where in the world you are writing from. And finally, we have this, a sentence that should go onto the rear view mirror of every project manager's car. And it reads, "Warning, milestones are closer than they appear to be." With that, remember that you are a project manager and not a project doer. Try not to do the project work. Instead, manage the project and do everything you can so that the specialists that are assigned to your project can do their work. Remove obstacles out of their way or bring them pizza if you have to. Until next time.